All right, CNT140, we're looking at Chapter 6. So Chapter 5, we looked at a lot of the internal structure of the fiber, if you will. Now we're going to look at some of the external structure of the fiber, the cable itself. So here we're going to be looking at the jacket and, how the fibers are arranged inside the cable and so forth. All right, so let's take a look. The cable itself provides protection for the optical fiber that's inside. And the cable kind of refers to the whole thing. The fibers inside, the strength members, the buffers, the jacket, armoring, so forth. All those pieces together they call the cable, if you will. And they come in a lot of different arrangements, and care needs to be given to selecting the right cable style for the application, where it's going to be installed, if you will. So here they had a picture showing you the zip cord, distribution, loose tube, breakout. Those are a few of many variations that we'll take a look at. The cable's job is to protect the fibers from the environment where it's being installed. So things like, is it going to be wet? Are we going to have to do a lot of pulling to install it? Doesn't need to be flame retardant because we're installing it above the ceiling inside of a building. Doesn't need to be ultra flexible. Is it going to be exposed to chemicals or wide temperature ranges? Is it going to be installed in an area where critters might actually try to chew through it? So all these things are factors in selecting the right cable, but also how the cable is constructed for those applications. So inside a building, we have to really worry about meeting all of the fire codes, plenum rated jacket, etc., etc. But I don't have to worry too much about the elements. Meanwhile, outside, I do have to worry about the elements, and I might not have to worry about the fire code, because it might just be installed underground or in a conduit or so forth. But I might need to worry about it being armored or having the strength members so it's hanging between telephone poles, etc. So all cables are comprised of layers, and some will add additional pieces. Tight buffer, loose tube, strength members, cable jacket, protection from water, moisture, protection against crushing rodents, etc. So let's go through those, and I try to put a lot of sample pictures in here so you can see what they're talking about. Tight buffer coating, yes. A lot of the cable we deal with inside our networks between closets and so forth will be this style of zip cord. And the actual fiber itself, the glass stub is there, here, if you will, and then the buffer is around the outside of that. And that is there for protection of the fiber. Loose tube cables, these tend to get used for outside plant use, if you will. You have the jacket, you have strength members, the loose tube, and then the fibers are laying in there loose, almost like, straws inside of a tube, if you will, just kind of laying in there. And that tends to isolate those from the high pulling tension of pulling the cable down through a conduit or so forth. So protecting the fibers in that way of like the fiber's not attached to what's around it. Strength members and stiffeners. Well, here is some zip cord with the strength members. Those strength members are typically, they call it aramid yarn. The brand name we think of is Kevlar. That gets used for two reasons. It's protection for, an extra layer of protection for the fiber inside, but the main reason it's there, it's cushioning, if you will, but the main reason it's there is it is a strength member that will not stretch. If I grab a hold of this and pull it, it's not going to stretch. So that allows you to tie onto that instead of the jacket or the fiber. The jacket would stretch, the fiber would break. I tie onto this to be able to pull it through a conduit or install it. That's what that allows for, those strength members. Some fibers will even have a stiffener down the middle, like a fiberglass rod, if you will, down the middle of the fiber to give the overall fiber some rigidity, giving it some strength. And again, you could attach the pulling, if you're going to pull this to a conduit, you can attach it to that strength member in the middle of the fiber. Some are going to have jacket for outside. Here we're actually looking at a jacket for outside use, and that jacket is going to be rated for resistance to UV, resistance to moisture, resistance to sometimes temperature changes. Okay, so an outside fiber like this guy, this is actually an aerial cable. The steel cable attaches to the two, the one utility pole and the next utility pole, and then this jacket acts as like a little hammock to carry the fibers that are inside. So that jacket is there for protection of the fiber, protection from the elements, and so forth. Some cases, the jacket is there for protection for water blocking if we're installing it underground, burying it underground. And in here, there might be an additional layer for armor if we're burying underground with a rodent issue, things that are going to chew through the fiber. Indoor, we have to worry about it being flame retardant. You know, our plenum rating that we talked about before. So we should remember our general, riser, plenum. Look at that last letter, general, riser, plenum. General being used for like patch cable in a closet. Riser being used for connecting closet to closet vertically up through the building. And then plenum being installed above the ceiling, down the hall, and into a room kind of thing. So look for those ratings, riser, okay, here's another riser, here over here is plenum, it even says plenum right there, but OFNP plenum. Also remember that our jackets are letting us know the color code of the type of fiber we're dealing with inside, whether it be a multi-mode, single mode, etc. So remember all of these kind of color codes, if you will. All right, so when they talk about the jacket, letting you know the type of fiber as well as the fire rating, we're looking at the code for the fire rating, and then we're looking at the jacket color to let us know the type of fiber we're dealing with, or the connector to let us know what type of fiber we're dealing with. Jacket itself, as we said before, that can be there for protection from the elements, and we might even be adding a layer of armor that is usually a stiff foil shield, if you will, metallic shield. That can be there for protection from either crushing, if this is being buried underground, crushing of the dirt up top that is put on top of it, or from the critters that are in the ground that would want to try to chew through things. If you've ever dealt with mice or squirrels or whatever, you know rodents want to chew on things, so that's there for protection from that. If we're dealing with, again, fibers outside, there should either be a gel here for moisture protection of the fiber, or sometimes there's a wire blocking membrane, almost like a tape that goes around, trying to keep the water out and away from the fibers so they don't deteriorate quickly. The buffer and so forth on it. And here again, the armor for protection from crush and resistance and so forth. Yep. Generally, your type buffered cables are used indoors, premise cabling. This kind of cable over here, okay. These are also type buffer. These are also type buffer. All those fibers in there would be type buffered. The kinds we run into are the zip cord, simplex zip cord. This is the type we tend to deal with a bunch as we're connecting closets together. One is send, one is receive. Distribution cable, this might actually be installed between two buildings. We still do have type buffered fibers in here, but I now have a large bundle of fibers, maybe 12 or 24. And remember, if I have 12 fibers, that's basically 6 connections. 24 would basically be 12 connections, because you have the send and receive that you worry about. Sometimes you install that distribution cable between buildings, giving you connections you need now and potentially in the future. With the distribution cable, this typically needs to get installed into some kind of breakout box, because these are not very strong on their own. We need protection from them being bent and broken. They might actually get terminated into a whole bunch of ports that we can plug into and use as well. And here's your breakout cable. This tends to get used for sorry, a little distraction there. These tend to get used for, it's a rugged cable design that can be terminated without worrying about junction boxes, patch panels, etc. Or the protection, these breakout boxes, they don't have to worry about those. These can get terminated right to junction boxes or patch panels. Rugged design, suitable for conduit, industrial applications, quick terminations, and this could be economic. This can be more economic where fiber count isn't too large and distances too long, but it's going to require more labor to terminate. Loose tube cables are designed for outside plant. Again, where I might have a lot of pulling tension. I'm pulling around those fibers. They're not kind of tied up with the pulling, so that gives them some protection. And here's some of your loose tube fibers. This is a drawing of one showing you the idea. Here's an actual jacket, loose tube, and your fibers in there. And a lot of times you might have like a dozen or 24 fibers in there. There is now micro cables. These tend to be bend-ins instead of fibers, packed a lot of them in a small space. I can have 144 fibers in the size of basically a pencil, if you will. Here is a pencil and a micro cable with 144 microfibers in there. And here is showing you pencil to that, and one that's just a little larger, giving you 288 fibers. Yeah, so that's kind of a specialty cable that can get used. Those can be installed into your air-blown fiber ducts, if you will. We've looked at that before. So you install the ductwork in the ground or above ceilings, that sort of thing, and then these micro cables can be pulled through those or blown through those, air-blown fiber through those, to give you a lot of connections through that ductwork. There is ribbon cable as well. Ribbon cable, I have all the fibers laying next to each other, almost like pencils laying on a desk, and typically like 12 fibers across, and then you can stack those rows of 12 on top of each other. So here would be a standard like ribbon cable itself. There's your 12 fibers color-coded. If I need a larger fiber count, you literally just start stacking those ribbon cables on top of each other. Here we have 5 ribbons and 12 fibers, so you have about 60 fiber connections. And then here would be a tube with some breakout cables of each tube is 60 fibers. Then I have 6 of those, so I have like 360 fibers in this breakout ribbon cable, if you will. So you can get a large fiber count in a small space. Some of them actually use this divider that you have the ribbon cables in each area or multi-fibers in each area. So again, you can have a very large count, 140, 500, 600, 700 fibers in there. One of the other things about ribbon cable is if I have a fusion splicer, and this actually is a ribbon cable coming in, there's like a dozen fibers there, there's a dozen fibers there. This fusion splicer can fuse all 12 of those in basically one go. And this is actually showing you on the screen 12 fibers on this side, 12 fibers on this side. It's going to fusion splice those together. So if I have a high fiber count distribution cable with ribbon, I can literally be doing 12, 12, 12 each time I terminate, and do a high production termination of your fiber run. Armored cable, we said, anytime we're doing direct bury, this will have the actual jacket plus the armoring around and water blocking. So armored cable can be used for that direct burying. Aerial cable, as we've shown before, part of that is going to be a strength member, usually like a steel cable that would be attached to the utility poles. And then this jacket arrangement almost looks like a figure 8 if you look at it from the end. There's a open loop down here that the fibers get installed in, and this right here almost acts like a hammock. The stress is being taken by the steel strength fiber member up there, and then these are just kind of going along for the ride. The fibers are kind of going along for the ride. There's an optical power ground wire that can get installed. If I look across the large utility lines, up at the very top can be a fiber installed that is there for grounding purposes, and inside of that can be a bunch of fibers inside of that cable that's installed there, and that would allow them for communication, it says here, grid maintenance, communication, etc., across their utility network. So installing that across the power lines, I now have a data connection around there used for grid maintenance and so forth. We've mentioned underwater and submarine cables before. These are going to have many layers of protection for water as well as pressure if it's laying on the bottom of the ocean floor, to resist the pressure pushing water into the fiber to deteriorate it. It's usually a loose tube with the fibers resting inside the loose tube, and multiple layers of stress protection as well as water protection. And here is a breakout showing all the layers involved. These need to get installed with special equipment. A boat, the fiber is laid on the boat. The boat will typically drag plow or some sort across the bottom to lay the fiber in the trench that it makes. And I showed some of these maps before showing you the different fiber links connecting continents. All right, we'll come back in the next part and keep on going.